Hello and welcome to Thursday's episode of the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord. Today we are continuing to go through the power and primacy of the Pope. As for the declaration, "On this rock I will build my church," Matthew chapter 16 verse 18, certainly the church has not been built upon the authority of a man. Rather it has been built upon the ministry of the confession Peter made, in which he proclaims that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, Matthew chapter 16, verse 16. Therefore, Christ addresses Peter as a minister. On this rock, that is, this ministry. Therefore, he addresses him as a minister of this office in which this confession and doctrine is to be in operation, and says, "Upon this rock," i.e. this preaching and preaching office. Furthermore, the ministry of the New Testament is not bound to places and persons like the Levitical Old Testament ministry was. Rather, it is spread throughout the whole world. That is where God gives his gifts, apostles, prophets, pastors, and teachers, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11. Nor does this ministry work because of the authority of any person, but because of the word given by Christ, Romans chapter 10, verse 17. Nor does a person add anything to this word in office. It matters not who is preaching and teaching it. If there are hearts who receive and cling to it, to them it is done as they hear and believe. Most of the Holy Church Fathers, such as Origen, Cyprian, Augustine, Hilary, and Bede, interpret the passage "on this rock" in this way, as not referring to the person of Peter. Chrysostom says, "Upon this rock, not upon Peter, for he built his church not upon man, but upon the faith of Peter. But what was his faith? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Hilary says, "The Father revealed to Peter that he should say, 'You are the Son of the living God,' Matthew chapter 16, verse 17. Therefore, the building of the church is upon this rock of confession. This faith is the foundation of the church. As for what is said in John chapter 21, verses 15 through 19, 'Feed my lambs,' and 'Do you love me more than these?' It does not follow from this passage that a peculiar superiority was given Peter. Christ tells him feed, i.e. teach, preach, the word, the gospel, or rule the church with the word, the gospel, which task Peter has in common with the other apostles. The second article is even clearer. Christ gave the apostles only spiritual power, i.e. the command to teach the gospel, to announce the forgiveness of sins, to administer the sacraments, to excommunicate the godless without bodily force by the word. He did not give them the power of the sword, the right to establish, occupy, or bestow kingdoms of the world. Romans chapter 13, verse 4. For Christ says, 'Go, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you.' Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. Also, 'As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you.' John chapter 20, verse 21. It is clear that Christ was not sent to bear the sword or possess a worldly kingdom, as he himself says, 'My kingdom is not of this world,' John chapter 18, verse 36. And Paul says, 'Not that we lord it over your faith,' 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 24, and 'The weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh,' 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, and so forth. A contrast between Christ and the Pope. Christ in his passion is crowned with thorns and led forth to be ridiculed in royal purple, John chapter 19, verse 2. This symbolizes that in the future, after his spiritual kingdom was despised, i.e. the gospel was suppressed, another kingdom of a worldly kind would be set up with the appearance of churchly power. So the Constitution of Boniface VIII and the Chapter Omnis, distinction 22, and similar opinions are false and godless, for they argue that the Pope is by divine right the ruler of the kingdoms of the world. From this notion, horrible darkness has been brought into the Church, and after that, great commotions have arisen in Europe. The ministry of the gospel was neglected, Acts chapter 6, verses 1 to 4, and 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 13 to 14. And the knowledge of faith and the spiritual kingdom became extinct. Christian righteousness was assumed to be the outward government the Pope had established. Next, the popes began to seize kingdoms for themselves. They transferred kingdoms, they harassed with unjust excommunications and wars the kings of almost all nations in Europe, but especially the German emperors. Sometimes they did this for the purpose of occupying cities of Italy. Other times they wanted to conquer the bishops of Germany and wrest away from the emperors the right to appoint bishops. In fact, it is even written in the Clementines, when the empire is vacant, the pope is the legitimate successor. The pope has not only seized dominion, which is contrary to Christ's command, he has also exalted himself above all kings like a tyrant. The following should not be condemned as much as detested. A. He makes his claim on the authority of Christ. B. He transfers the keys to a worldly government. And C. Then he binds salvation to these godless and criminal opinions when he insists that believing this dominion belongs to him by divine right is necessary for salvation. This has been the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord, and I wish you a blessed day.